11. Revival is revolutionary. So when I say revival is revolutionary, what I mean is revival changes things. You can't have revival and everything stays the same. Otherwise, if that happens, it's not revival. It has a profound transformational impact. When there's an outpouring of the Spirit in revival power, all kinds of things can happen. Crime can decrease. Church attendance may increase. Immorality may all but diminish. And God is held in high honor when revival comes. That's part of the aftermath. And sometimes he becomes the central topic of conversation all around that region where this outpouring is taking place. He becomes what everybody's thinking about almost 24/7. If I have time, I'll tell you a story about that. So just imagine, how could revival affect Zanesville? It's okay to use your imagination, then start to pray for it. How might it affect Ohio or beyond? Let me tell you a story about how it affected Kentucky, our neighboring state. In 1799, this revival, 2-year revival, began. It was called the Cane Ridge Revival. And on the rough frontier of America at that time, where vibrant Christianity was all but extinct and belief in God was considered a fable, God began to pour out his Spirit in incredible power while a few people gathered in the open air to take communion. Spontaneously, people began to show up by the thousands at these communion services. It sounds like the Hebrides revival, doesn't it? It's incredible. People just showed up because the Spirit of God was drawing them. So Paul Conklin, he writes in his book called Cane Ridge, America's Pentecost. That's the name of the book. He writes the impact of this revival. Let me read you an excerpt. I think I have that up here. By the fall of 1801, evangelical visitors to the central counties of Kentucky marveled at a near utopia. The Spirit of God had burned and cleansed the whole area. Practically everyone had been somehow affected by the revival. George Baxter, when he arrived from Shenandoah Valley, thought he breathed the special cleansed air in Kentucky. He found the most moral place I had ever been in. He heard no profane expression. Everyone was amiable and benevolent. No private quarrels remained, and a religious awe seemed to pervade the country. Isn't that amazing? Come and do it, God. Looking at the clock. I'll just tell you a quick story. I like stories. Helps me get my mind around some of these concepts. So I talked about how everyone, their brain just gets occupied with the things of God in times of revival. In the Welsh revival, which began in 1904 in Wales, you heard of this, Drew? Yes. Evan Roberts, heard of Evan Roberts? Drew was just in Wales doing missions over there. And Evan Roberts, the amazing young man, evangelist that God used to spark revival that, again, it impacted nations. It says that, I heard that in the record books over there, for the soccer champions in Wales, this would be like our Super Bowl, who won the Super Bowl each year. The year that the revival was at its height, there was no soccer played. Everyone was too preoccupied with God to go to sporting events, and so in the record books it just reads revival. Has no champion that year. God's not against soccer. He's not against sports, I don't think, but boy, there are times when they need to take a back seat. they also had, it's another story about that revival. The miners there, the coal miners, they had these ponies they called pit ponies, which would carry, you heard this, Drew? They would carry the coal out of these mines in these carts behind them. And when revival swept through, everybody began to clean up their language, and there was no more profanity or anything that the miners used to curse constantly. And so the pit ponies couldn't understand any of the commands. So the mine owner actually had to buy new ponies and retrain them with new commands because the language was now cleaned up. Is that how it goes? It's incredible. Okay. Revival is revolutionary. It changes things.